Let's see which one this one is. Oh, here we go. All right, Lisa, please take it away.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to make the transition towards the next big block of themes we're talking about, which is sort of multipolar concerns. I work for an organization called MIRI, Machine Intelligence Research Institute. We are arguably the oldest existing AI safety research institute. Our mission is increasing the probability that humanity can safely navigate a transition to a world with smarter than human AI. And we sort of have the belief that across the last year we've updated towards, we don't think technical alignment is going to get there in time, and therefore we are now focusing on trying to get good regulation to buy time towards building the right kind of technical solutions we need in the longer term, using comms and technical governance research work. So I'm involved with starting up a new technical governance research team at MIRI as of earlier this year, and our mission is to increase the probability of getting effective US AI regulation that makes strong safety cases. So the kind of work we intend to be doing is doing research on threat modeling, analyzing assumptions made in current standards proposals, and thinking about what arguments do we have for these assumptions being valid to make. And insofar as we conclude that there are gaps here, doing technical research on potential amendment suggestions and thinking about alternate proposals. So I'm actually really interested to hear throughout this workshop all sorts of ideas on what are directions from security that have currently been underexplored towards like potential governance solutions for AI safety. So a couple of cold takes for context on where I'm coming from and sort of the assumptions I'm making throughout stuff I'll say in the rest of my talk. My highest probability is on the scenario of alignment is really hard to solve. We'd likely see a slowish takeoff, and also that my ETA for smarter than human intelligence is in around 2 to 3 years. I'm pretty confused on whether we're likely to get uni or multipolar scenarios in the very long term. I think this probably depends how far we're looking and also how various tech questions play out. I think it's likely that in the very long term, we'll end up in a unilateral situation, maybe with a coalition of AIs or a single AI. However, I do think in the short to medium term, it seems likely or possible that we might end up in a multipolar scenario. So I'm going to explore that a little bit here. I'm trying to lay out an overview of what changes for technical governance specifically when we consider multipolar versus unipolar scenarios. So in the unipolar case, it seems a lot more likely that it might be possible to get some sort of unified regulatory framework, whereas in the multipolar case, it seems more likely that different players would be developing varying regulatory frameworks across different nations and firms. So this points towards much higher pressure and need for some type of international coordination, as well as some sort of multilateral regulatory organizations. In the multipolar case, it seems like we might have a lot more difficulties with enforcing regulations, as this may turn out to be a lot more complex. In the unipolar case, it seems to me that we'd probably be more likely to end up with some sort of centralized control, either within a certain region or a certain type of government, which could have pros and cons. I think it can both increase the risk of totalitarianist outcomes, but as well as if it ends up in a government which has like very strong systems in place, it could also lead to a higher chance of more ethical leadership. So it kind of is a bit more bimodal than the multipolar case, perhaps. The unipolar situation seems like it might have higher risks from single points of failures with a certain type of technology. In the multipolar scenario, it seems like there might be also various benefits, such as opportunities for more diverse defense security systems. Also, a potentially varying tech stack for the systems at the frontier, which could have, again, various pros and cons. It could lead to like faster innovation, but also capabilities acceleration, as well as seems like we'd need a lot more research progress to find safety solutions for these various tech stacks. I already mentioned reducing risks from totalitarianism in this case, as well as some obvious stuff like multipolar scenarios seem like they would incentivize more of an arms race or race to the potential bottom, as well as having situations where we're at higher risk for individual parties in this multipolar scenario defecting from any kind of international treaty due to using this as some type of bargaining chip. So where are we right now? My current read on the situation is we're kind of seeing this really big gap between where the industry is at, trying to put forth proposals with really like concrete suggestions. And in order to get so concrete, it seems like it's necessary to make some types of assumptions around what the risks are. And there seem to remain a lot of open questions on how we can make sure we're actually covering all of this. On the other hand, the government stuff, for example, in the US, the NIST RMF is coming from like a really high level of abstraction, making fewer assumptions. And it seems like there's this huge space in the middle where there are a bunch of questions on how can we bridge this gap? How can we get from here to strong affirmative safety cases, as well as which solutions that we're currently talking about can scale towards smarter than human AI. So some thoughts on like what MIRI is doing in this space is, apart from thinking we need to do a lot more research on evals and standards so that we can get there in the short term, what about CAST? What is CAST? CAST is a new framework from a MIRI researcher named Max Harms, which is called corrigibility as a singular target. So corrigibility is a concept that has existed in alignment for a while and actually builds on work from Paul Castrano, Alex Turner, Richard No, who's also here. And this CAST framework basically aims to reformulate this in a certain way and tries to develop this work towards a potentially implementable training framework. So it aims to address the principal agent problem by training specifically for corrigibility and making this the main goal that an agent is robustly trying to optimize towards, where a corrigible agent is one that cautiously reflects on itself as a flawed tool and has the focus on trying to empower its principal to fix flaws and mistakes it makes. So the hope here is that using this as a focus for training would be a way to reduce catastrophic or X risks in the intermediate term as we move towards smarter than human AI. Cool, thanks. So like a couple of contrasts here between the path we are kind of on so far and the corrigible AGI path. In the case of like friendly AGI, the goal is basically that it would act in the interest of humanity, whereas the corrigible one would be mostly kind of an amoral tool that is just trying to make predictions in the interest of its principal. The corrigible one would be much more differential and passive, whereas the friendly one is supposed to be more like benevolent and helpful. The idea with the corrigible one is that it seems to be a lot simpler, potentially, because it's an inhuman goal to train into the AI, whereas in the friendly case, this could turn out to be a lot more complex. We have all these problems around how do we specify the human goals. And they also do have different vulnerabilities. The friendly AI would be more for mistakes made in training, whereas the corrigible one would be more vulnerable to human misuse by the principal or the end user. So a few questions I have for this workshop are, what kind of security and hardware tools do we have for contributing to successful AI regulation? There's some obvious stuff here that's already in the literature around, like, we can do stuff with compute monitoring, on-chip monitoring, export controls, and so on. But is there something that we're not tracking here yet? And are there directions we should perhaps fund more research on, particularly if we're thinking about multipolar scenarios where we need to have some sort of robust international governance? What sort of tech innovation should we be exploring? Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for the nice talk. Can you say a little bit more about how you see corrigibility as a simple goal and like what ways you have tried to implement this so far?
Yeah, so I should say that this is something that started earlier this spring as a new agenda, and I don't think MIRI will actually like build this because we're not building frontier AI. But the idea is basically that we I should probably keep holding this, that we formalize this as a potential training goal and also conduct initial empirical research on how this, whether or not, for example, this trades off against performance in certain ways. And why it's simple, I think the logic here routes a lot more through it's one goal that you can formalize quite concretely and define very clearly. And that we have like one particular training regime that we're going to publish towards the end of this month, where there's like ideas on how we could optimize for this specifically. So the idea is through this goal, which is not one where there are instrumental reasons why this goal would be unlearned, we could through this basically create a pipeline where there is like, I don't know how to say this, where you can very clearly target the training towards this, as opposed to having very broad goals, as is like currently the thing we try to optimize for with lots of values and different goals.
Hey, Lisa. I really like the operational adequacy post that MIRI put out like a year ago or 2 years ago. And I was wondering if you've thought about sort of trying to expand that to actually help sort of the government sort of figure out if an AI project sort of meets some of these criteria or not. Like it seems like it's really good framework, but it's still kind of abstract, and like it seems like making it more concrete could be good.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something that we should probably do. I think like one thing that is the focus of the technical governance team is also trying to think about what are like alternative proposals that are not currently considered yet, and how can we work them out into something that is actually like practically implementable and actually not creating a speed bump in a negative way, and finding like a right balance between actually having really strong safety scenarios, given that we believe AGI is coming really soon, as well as not harming positive innovation as much as it's possible.
Thank you so much, Lisa.